Could you check sound for me, Caden?
Yeah, just boot it up.
We are hot.
Ah, thanks. I try so hard.
Let's... Do. Sound. Do. Chicken sound. Do.
You sound good.
And you guys sound good and stuff? Oh.
I don't know about Jan and Jeremy, but we sound good.
Yeah, I always sound good.
Just looks like I'm having a few errors with...
Yeah.
Try and get that fixed.
Everything sounds good on my end.
Everything still sounds good?
Yes, sir.
Alright, I'll keep watching that just in case. Do.
It's getting an
A little bit.
When is that anything different though?
Yet. Says
Seems good.
Mods on your chat, John, or no?
I probably will later. I'm just making sure. Oh, there we go. Make sure my quality's good. Keep saying I'm dropping frame rate. Do you have any problems? Cool. Then in that case, we're all good. Good. Sarah?
Our only passive person.
Yeah, but he won't make it.
I know.
But I think we're good to go, right?
Yeah, probably.
There. There she is.
I've been here for a minute now.
I was just waiting for you to say something, so I know you're. Yeah.
I'm here.
Alrighty.
We did it.
You're feeling Talk Show with C4, Sarah Vike, Insanieac, Jeremy, the Great Goblin, and special guest Jan Vike. Dun 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 dun. Change. Hello! Welcome to the Goblin podcast. I am your host, C4. Beside me is Sarah Vike. Below me is the Great Grease Goblin. Jeremy. And Insanieac would love to be here, but he's unfortunately only going to be joining us in chat tonight, so look for him there. And we are the hosts of the Village Talk Show. We topics, story, philosophy driven, sometimes modern times driven, and today we are joined by a special guest to my left. This is Jan Vike. He is our resident political who we bring on for political topics. He was supposed to be on Sunday, but sadly he had to cancel, so we moved him to today. And that will be for the first part of our time. We're going to talk about backstory. And the idea of backstory for either small characters or big characters. But the first part of the show, while we have Jan here, is going out basically a paper I read recently, very recently. And it was Corpocracy. What Corpocracy is a relatively new word. The idea of it is you basically have a system of government on a corporation. So CEOs, high level execs, they essentially run the country. The country is completely we'll say the Marxist duality of where the bourgeoisie control the proletariat. The idea is that so let's say they thanks for the follow mountain adventure. Say they how do I say this? Say they decide that employees dental, they will have a 1% better production. And so throughout the entire country, the leaders of the country who are part of this corporation will all of a sudden make dental mandatory. So therefore it then leads out the rest of the world, or rest of their country, their nation, what they control. The reason this is relative to China is there's been a lot of argument that China is not actually communist. There was a huge push a long time ago, about 10, 15 years ago now, the economy, defer to the economy and how much they actually don't really vent the ideas of communism. You have this the idea that the government, the people in power, they basically run it like a corporation. And what the Chinese government at the Chinese as is not a communist government, but like a giant corporation. All the people who live in China are part of the corporation, which explains why they get a leader. So a leader of a company is elected through vote of other CEOs in the company. How the leader in China gets picked. It is a vote amongst the leaders of the country on who will but it taken leadership. So Xi Jinping at any moment, if he a core group, then they can actually vote him out and put someone else in. It hasn't happened because they usually have a very voting process like a corporation. And so after hearing this, I thought this would be a great topic for our friend Jan here. And it's too bad Insanieac isn't here. I'd love to hear his opinion, but hopefully he'll be in the chat. And yeah, I'll open the floor before I give it to. Oh no, I'll give it to Jan. What are your opinions? I've given you a bit of time to look this up. I've given you a bit of time to look into it. So what are your initial opinions on this?
Initial opinions are it's my initial opinions are it's a nice, what's the word?
I gotta turn you up a little. Hold on, I'm just gonna turn you up a tiny bit. Please keep talking.
It's disappear from my head all the time. Terrible. But basically, my initial thoughts are that China's through far close to a socialistic government than Corpocracy. It's sure the country, the government still has ultimate power over them and take. What I know of it, corporations is my very muddled way of getting at a simple idea.
You're basically stranglehold for the corporations. It's hard to say that they are corpocracy, but I would argue it's the other way around. I mean, Huawei is so ingrained. I would argue that, and China probably will lower their tax rates, and they'll have them basically have a more competitive.
So, in a short-term way, at least, cutting taxes for on
But isn't
why
when,
is for corporations.
and how it would start that way, and I would argue that it continues thousands for an entity. Wouldn't you say corp the unless you have that level of commitment from the Chinese government? And it's huge. So
Be a more to be a corp talk, as I understand from the bit. It would require more that the actually take over the government and they run things, and what I the control than the, and I mean the big one in gaming, Tencent. Entities controlled by the government, they don't control the government.
sorry, just had throat. All right. Let's open up the floor a bit. I know Sarah and the Mr. may not have insight into politics, but I know Jeremy.
This is such a new strategy that is really about, to be honest.
Oh, it's
this is No idea.
Think of the Lego movie. I think that's where the idea was spurred on, where the entire world is controlled by a corporation. It's just big business, isn't it?
Business.
Yeah, yeah. That's think it's based.
It is already.
But it isn't. It's supposed to be separate.
Nation.
No. The is ingrained. What you were talking about are lobby groups, and lobby groups are corrupt Americans so that big companies can influence political decisions, but they last say to the people, if this is production, if this is in the long run, they treat their workers like crap because they know that if they do, production down will be down. It's about basically balancing a corporate entity in one. Does that help?
It's still different.
But in legal corruption in lobby groups, you have thousands of politicians to sway them and represent their interests in a Corpocracy. Those are.
Say.
I'm sorry. What was that?
And the politicians still have the final say, and through them the people. The rich.
Exactly. An avenue to influence, but they do not outright control the example. Worker of worker rights would not exist in a corpocracy. What going to and this is how the nation's going to be run. We are
but I do actually have the perfect example of hypocrisy. It's actually a book. It's a book called The Pro- It's actually written by a band. Someone who gets the future. What happened in the future is that there has been this company that created free energy, and because of them, people were able to get energy for just extremely cheap prices. And the government opened up monopolies, allowing the country and eventually in the world point when
so and how book
2016, it's quite new.
I don't know how old this topic is. I only just read about it recently, so maybe because it does sound very similar.
Yeah.
I mean,
As a in kind of book.
of that government that kind of government as style. But it's is the idea with a federation is you make a bar to entry. Like everyone's born, like as Starship Troopers does it, everyone's born a civilian, but you have to work and you have to be contributing to society to become to be a citizen. transition from civilian to with a as a way to grasp higher heights, you could say. What I do is, or at least from what I understand, is a corpocracy, and kind of reflect. No, you're same as else. There's only you and me, and actually move up in our society is the same idea. Or you'll move up in our society, and that then leads into the pros of a corpocracy, because a pro would be only people who move up in the corporation are the most ones in actual activity, the ones that have the ability to change something. It kind of encourages that, but at the same time, it also encourages, I mean, to an extent, basically a class division. There are those up to the levels of the corporation and live a basically relaxed life. People near the bottom who don't have those natural skills and maybe are hard pressed to get them or to learn those skills, so they get stuck in perpetual positions. So their family takes over their hereditary positions. So which I then, what is different with China? Like, is current China any different?
I'd actually argue would be far less like that. It's sure you could potentially work your way up through it, but get ahead out of poverty is by being free to from to companies with higher pay, which you wouldn't get in basically a monopolistic stock that are actually run by the corporations. Also, you wouldn't have people able to start businesses, which would severely make the amount of possible higher paid, higher influence positions in society. I can see where I'm from, but just looking it up a little more, a lot of the ideas of corpocracy came out against antitrust laws being weak in the States, such as in a book in 1956 called The Power Elite. It's going to quickly read off Wikipedia for this one. In his 1956 book, The Power Elite, sociologist C. Wright Mills states that together with the military and political establishment, leaders that is in control of the U.S. It's not a system where people can work their way up, other than the very rare individual has the right combination of luck, the proper
But you still, like, speaks to social control, social gatherings with, and even under horrible government conditions, you'll still find people making. It's just like I agree with that point. People are social creatures. Humans are social creatures. They will find in China where you have don't Everyone just keeps to their own and doesn't and tries to follow the law, at least the law as best they can.
Well, just watch. Obviously, you're going to have the same problems in literally any kind of political system. Just with corpocracy, it lends itself more to those problems and more meritocratic systems.
Hold on.
Like capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism.
A couple connection errors. The internet's being a little choppy right now.
Yeah, just a little.
Is everything good?
Quite a bit today.
It seems to be better now.
Okay. No, it's just me.
Internet.
I'm not
okay.
sure why. Anyway.
I think that was pretty much what I had to say.
Well, that makes sense. Like, at the same time, what makes it different? Makes it different from like what makes it different from China? What like because all I see is similarities. When you're telling me that, all I see is similarities.
Because in a lot of ways it is very similar. Whatever it is, I'm China's a corpocracy, but corpocracies are a system. It is very similar to other systems that are on have high government control of society and economics. Just in this case, in that case, it would be the be part of the history of Death Race where all the companies own little countries like an example of it, of course.
But I still think like, and even if you don't think that that's happening now, don't you see that as a future possibility? Don't you that is going? Like I would argue that even if they,
Yeah.
like that seems to be the collision course, if not.
Yeah, no, I 100% could see in China's future where it these controlling things and being controlled by the how much control they have over the companies. It just takes you of the in those companies for higher positions in the country to happen.
I guess. Well, I just see it as they're going. I especially that's why I really liked the article to begin with. I thought it was enlightening because it I'm glad we had to discuss it because you gave me some things to think about. Is it bad?
Yeah,
No.
really do.
Nope.
Nope. I'm still researching. I'm behind the times.
On that note, we'll move on to the next topic. You're more than welcome to join us for the topic, Jan. So Story.
Back
Uh,
to the beginning of
Story.
I watched Insanieac.
He's here in spirit.
You better
Backstory.
read.
Backstory. Let's just. So when I went to school for English, backstory, full class, and now I was under a professor who said there's no such thing as too much. You can flesh out your maker as much as you want. It doesn't matter if they only have one scene and one line in a book. The more you flesh out that character, the easier it is for you to build that character. And it's something you might find that they run into their family because you wrote it in their backstory and it doesn't feel shoehorned. Like, correctly. So he said the best way that your hero goes and buys bread. Backstory about family, lived in this part of the country, this, and you're completely free. And all this other part of the country, and you think to yourself, wait a second, didn't I write about a brother? And you look, there's not too much backstory, but too much exposition of backstory. The thing about backstory that becomes a problem is how much you give away. How much do you share right away? How much do you just work across the entire plane? And how much do you hold back? And that becomes a huge problem with writers. That's why you get entire segments like he says my professor would say one of the worst and best story is Old Man in the Sea. The entire book is the book, spoilers is about a man in a boat. He catches a fish, he wrestles with the fish, he catches the fish. That is the entire book.
Oh boy.
I was
But
just about to read that.
there are over 1,000 pages in this thing because it's all backstory. Every movement of his rod goes him of it's and you about he lets it know what's gonna happen. Because of you know his backstory. And my professor would say this is an example of backstory, but it's done right because the entire and that's why you get entire movies or it's all about the entire lead up to a point that we expected it to be. Like when we see a clone, or we hear about Iron Man, exactly the most exciting. It doesn't exactly his number one villain, but the idea was it's a backstory movie. Where it becomes a problem is every single Batman movie except if you've never read DC and you've watched a comic and you've never watched a Batman anything, you know his shot in an alley.
Yeah.
You just know. It's become ubiquitous. And so here, since I have my legendary DM, my fantasy writer, and the great backstory. Oh, backstory. History.
I'd be better at talking about backstory.
But yes,
like Tolkien.
That's
it was a great. That exact thing. He wrote a fucking book of backstory.
Yes, he did. So I'm gonna open the floor to Sarah. sure Sarah's got blurted out she's not backstory, so please, please.
No, I'm good at backstory. Problem.
Oh,
I
reverse
like to write-
problem.
I like to write a lot of back. I have full that come from the backstory of different characters in what I'm actually trying to write. I have full things planned. There's a villain that has an entire book planned because she's just too interesting to not. Yeah, and literally different characters slow down my progress on.
Do you intend to release it, or is it just an exercise for you?
Oh, some of them I intend to release and some I don't. So some are
Okay.
exercises, whereas some are not.
So, but okay. So, what's the goal of your backstory? So, when I say that, do you actually? So, when you say you don't, some of it you're going to use and some of you don't. Help you with your process, or do you just do it? Does everyone have a backstory? Maker actually have a full backstory?
I do it for fun, but it also does help with the creativity. I go, oh, that would be so cool. I write it down, and then it just sits around in my mind, kind of stewing for a while, and then before I know it, there's a whole nother story in there. Not everyone has a backstory, no. I think everyone would if I took enough time, but I purposely try to avoid that because it takes so long. And everyone has a backstory to some extent. Every single person that is encountered, I know at least a little bit about them.
Okay. Let's move across to Caden. Sorry, Grease Goblin.
Yes.
When you do backstory, I guess more towards because you've played a lot of D&D, so for you it would be more personal backstory. Are you one of those people that just dilute backstory till the end of the earth, or do you actually think about what you're trying to do? Because I mean,
That varies depending on what the character is for. Like, if the character is for like an actual like campaign, then yeah, I'll flesh out a good bit of backstory. But if it's for a one shot, like the one we recently did, my wild sorcerer was completely just someone who liked to lick things and thought that's how he claimed things.
and that can definitely be funny. Like I
And it was.
definitely.
Worked.
But
Yeah.
you've written D&D.
Well.
No, not yet.
Okay. But if you did, would you keep on that same? Would you develop backstory for just the characters you want that are important? Because I know
a decent amount of back.
amount. Like, where do you cut the line? Like, oh, he has a home, a family, his favorite.
Yeah, pretty much that.
So you're very minimalist. You don't actually think
Yes,
about their history.
For like these, yes.
Okay. And
Like for like more important pieces, then yeah, I'll do a little bit more.
all right. And we move there and talk to Jan there. I know you at least run some D&D campaigns. So tell me, only the big ones.
At the moment, I'm still trying to get, but I know to different characters. If only just blurting out random things that I have to then remember.
But that's easy. When
Well, there was no, yeah.
when players or readers or an NPC that they like, it then forces you to make backstory, and that's something that's
Exactly.
more alive. But then what I was talking about is like I won't introduce a character into my story or into my D&D games unless they're well thought out. So that it's not that I feel like I'm going to share all this information. It's just I feel it's better for me because then I have a history to work off of, and I can actually players normally wouldn't get a chance to make. But that's just
that's exactly why I'm going to be starting to do more backstories for different NPCs, so that I'm going to be starting to do that for more, so that them and already have them written down instead of just making up a name on the trying not in case they do find the character interesting.
The Dungeon Master's Guide helps you with that. It has a whole table for names. You can just roll for names if you need to. The man's experience of this. Jeremy. Tell me. So when me and Jeremy started playing together, it was just me, Insanieac, and Chaos Incarnate. That's what we'll. And Jeremy had never met me before. Understood what I was, and sees ended stack. All of a sudden, it became a thing with me and Jeremy. He realized I wasn't killing any monsters, simply engrossing my army. Stat cards, and the fact that all Jeremy has to have dealt some backstory. I mean, I kind of wish Insaniac was here because I'd be making a ton of tea jokes. And
You still can. He's
a
in the
ton.
chat.
But Jeremy, wait.
Oh, it's too funny. Yeah, no, like a lot of the time it starts very basic. You just kind of want to know everybody. So you gotta like 3 or 4 years with about 4 just random off the top of your head ones and kind of work with them into the story because use them right away, you will eventually use them, and it makes it more simpler. And then as you go, you just kind of keep writing more. I don't know. You have what 1,400 something acolytes in a city.
It's not just us. Like you've been doing what we're talking about. I think you could color it better than I could.
Yeah. About the tea incident.
Me too.
The tea incident.
Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, was Insaniac to a room in his D&D character. It's a guy drinking tea, and then the asking about the tea. It's the flavor and whole to no.
I mean, that was bad joke.
But things like D will definitely talk to you about and try to pull out of you, especially as you have to be a little quick-witted when you're writing. These are you get to express a bit. like us, like the villain's backstory has to be good. I've read too many movies, read books, and then the villain's backstory is absolute bullshit, crap. George R. R. Martin, fuck your White Walkers. Ever. Holy fuck. Fucking for me. It pretty much ruined the series for me. I don't know, but it's like hasn't come into the books yet. Show. You see it in the show.
I
Well, guys, any movie in the last years do it and don't mention Loki. What's the backstory of that?
planet.
Pretty much.
Okay, now stop and tell me Loki. Tell me Loki. With second thought. Without even second thought. So let's go to DC. What is the backstory of Lex Luthor? Exactly. What's the backstory of the
Which one?
But that's one. There's multiple backstories, and we all know them. And it.
No. The Joker, we don't know.
Or we have bits and pieces.
My favorite edition is from Batman Mask of the Phantasm. That one goes into Joker's backstory.
Is that the one
before
where
they
started off as
Batman Mask of the Phantasm is where Batman's girlfriend becomes the other like Batman character, and she's murdering the mob.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that.
And then Joker was an ex-mobster.
Actually, I really enjoyed the backstory when he was a failed comedian who became the
Yeah, that's the killing joke.
But, okay.
No, that's Killing Joke.
On track. We back the newest back, but the power of a if it's not well written, presented, and if it's not well communicated, the character falls flat. And you can see out any protagonist too. Whenever I play D&D protagonist with the most generic backstory I've ever seen, right? I have no in LARP. I have no reasons to RP because this person are noble or in a book. Oh, I need this power. Oh, I automatically have this. Oh, this automatically. I need. I just had it inside. It's like it makes such a bland experience, and it's at the same time it's also lazy. Like when you're for a movie or you're at like Stephen King's level of ability that you're writing for a lifetime, I can understand you get a little tired, but then lower your content. put out fewer things that are actually good. That you can. It's such a crucial part of writing anything. Is people just dismiss it? Where it's like a 4-second. That's all. If story behind them, if you don't have little of an idea that character is, you're literally whatever you're making. You might as well just have a talking pylon. Says exposition up.
Back to Tolkien, I really appreciated how he did it in The Lord of the Rings. He apparently did to give people sympathy. Sauron.
That Mace Man?
Yeah, and then the evil eye.
The story?
No, Sauron, Saruman, because you know they're like 1-2 letters away from the same name.
Yeah, in characterization, very little backstory to him or anything like that. And some really out, and it's just a history of man, and there he is old as Sauron. In there, he anything like that, because he was the type of person that couldn't leave his stuff alone. He out in a book that if you loved it much, yeah, you could read that. And then his son continued to release these story books.
I thought it was his son.
It's more Melkor's the big villain in the Silmarillion, but Melkor is the one that created Sauron. So the story of Melkor is Sauron's backstory.
I got it.
Everything is from Tolkien. Like J.R.R. Tolkien wrote it all. It just his some of it.
So it's not like whose son decided to take over and write more of the story. I got it.
Yeah, it's like he left notes and he left pieces of books and his son finished them from what he wrote.
So let's go back to you, Sarah.
So,
Just a second. Backstory for your stuff. You go full out. Right?
Quite, yeah.
So is with the so you said it's not really with the intent to incorporate it. It's there. So you use it like the way I was taught, which is a tool. Just have a book of backstory. And need something to show why they're being affected. Do you on the maybe incorporate at least a into your story at some point?
Good chunks of it I want to incorporate into my story at some point. Like the backstory just sort of show up. What happened last night, I was writing about the Queen. I visit this kingdom. Wait a second, the elves are so old. Adventure with this other queen. It tends to be that where it just gets in the moment, but also not a moment, or it is like long planned and written or stored in the corner of my brain, and I know that it is.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a tool? Yes, but not. I go occasion.
Okay. So you use it like it should be used as like an as it were.
Yes. And sometimes, because if you remember we talked about the start and right for 2,000 years of history, there's obviously a lot more information than is going to go into 2,000 years. So sometimes I fill in pieces of like this time you don't see because it's not one of the huge events that fit into this history.
So, going back to Jeremy, what do you do? Do you have like an anthology you use, or like when you backstory, do you like an agenda? Do you keep everything always together, or do you separate it? God, that was horrible. Let me rephrase that. Do you keep do you keep all your backstory in one place to reference it, like or something that is it more something that you develop to let you have more fluid. I guess you have more wisdom. You're a DM, right? So you can choose when to make backstory, and you can obviously ancillary and what ones aren't, what ones are useless, especially choices. So you like you a bit of wiggle room, but at the same time develop more universe. Story becomes almost secondary. Did I talk much?
No. To
Alright.
both of them. I don't know. The Jim Carrey. I think that's the one.
You mean the number 23, right?
I think that's the one. It's the number ones where he goes crazy. Like he has to look mad. If I almost like pages out and glue them to like reorder like solid backstories for each. Right? There's probably like a graph here of like. There's probably a paragraph on like one of my. And then 3 or 4 paragraphs pages later, right?
Mm-hmm.
The name wasn't character, but he got named 4.
His name was Thor.
People keep getting named Thor.
His name is Thorn Blackwood.
Name Thorn, Jeremy?
Wasn't original, but like I mean, you've had other groups. Have you had backstory for all your characters, or has it just been basically smooth sailing until I decided to into your life?
And the whole campaign centered around the bad guy's backstory.
Please enlighten us.
G to a sense, much like a Jafar situation. And he was using orcs and coals to get him what he needed secretly, so it wouldn't be noticed, and slowly organizing this town into like a populace and civilized. To the point where like they had business and they had police, and this was like the first time that any of the players had ever seen anything like this, like a fully organized like orc, goblin, kobold force that were like multi races.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of it became a race between the players and this genie who could ascend to godhood first. And
Okay.
around for these. It's much like a MacGuffin treasure hunt.
Got it.
It definitely, yeah, it all around. His name was. What do they call the air ones? I think it's just a Jinn. Yeah, the
Okay.
air ones are just called Jinn. Wanted to raise to ascendancy. Their sultan, who was very like Buddha-esque, was about peace, be flow, and just be like one with everything. And seen that as they were two lesser beings because without air, most beings live. So
Mm-hmm.
and then the players minor, it ended up being one like big his essence before he could attain like a full. I don't know. It was a really interesting set piece battle as well too. But yeah, it was one of my cool.
Okay, but did you develop that all by yourself? Did you get help? Like you developed
I
that
know
backstory?
that was something I developed all myself. Used a pre-made campaign's dungeons to lay everything else on top of. So I didn't have to design any of the dungeons, but I had the full designing story and NPCs. Right, all my design, everything else was done for me.
Mhm.
Right, made it kind of easy and cookie cutter in that way. So that was fun.
So you got to basically focus on the back. And like, was every one of those things you told me used in the story? Did you figure that, or was there something left in the cutting floor?
Actually, eventually, time they eventually figure everything out. Be like this events, and they would have another piece of knowledge to move forward in the story. Right now, we have another key. This door does. They found ways of like seeing what they slowly cyber is,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a lot of fun because like each piece of knowledge to the
That sounds awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So, so did that did you develop? So backstory. Was there any small ones that you didn't expect to?
tons. I'm giving about a half dozen different kobolds. I wish I had all my journals, otherwise I could pull out all their names
Hmm.
and at least on each of them. Um, there were 13 of them, so they were hired by the player. So they made a couple dragons because they knew they had moved in and out of dragon territory without being threatened, right?
Yep.
So it was really creative in the way that the players now were dealing with a lot of the monsters and that was the way I kind of wanted to turn the campaign on its head too, was dealing with monsters instead of people. Most players would go in and try and murder Hobart their way or kill every other monster in sight, right? Whereas now they're with the orcs and the goblins, and they're working against humans.
Okay.
Sense.
So does that? So if you were to write, would you start with a backstory, or would you eventually develop? Like if you were to write it and then it.
Uh, I mean, I find backstory determines goals. So yeah, I start relative story. I don't know. I guess the is most characters have. I think they're going to be important. And if I need to go further than back, I can. But at least a figure gives you good.
For me, it's a birth kind. Give backstory, it has to be from birth in my mind, because depending on how I'm considering that's how I write, I need to, in case in case I need to, I want that. Because I don't want to be influenced by where I've gone. I'm really scared of when I don't write, I'll then make it at the point rather than where it should be. As a resonate with anyone?
I agree with that.
That drove me the most when I coming with characters and I'll turn off my camera. I find that sometimes helps out my.
It's
Yeah,
a little
see, that's
choppy there. If you could repeat that.
you might.
Yeah, it also might be internet, so that might not be ideal.
Yeah, it's already looking.
Please repeat what you just said.
Right now, camp doing a pre. I instantly got to on. Yeah, it kind of stalled because I was going way too much into that and not paying attention to anything else.
That is definitely a problem with DMing. Can attest to that.
This huge open. Shiny object. Let's go there.
Ooh,
Right.
somebody can shoot.
He writes 90% of his world players to go to the 10.
Well, no, do a show on Wednesdays because I have to go to bed. It's our Denmark. Let's do events. China and the
Dystopian night.
Only if
Okay.
you believe it is.
And what about backstory? We lost all our
Backstory?
China. Nice to band. You're quiet. Any thoughts? Any things you've learned? What did you learn today?
I learned how to say the fancy word that we kept saying, but I forgot how to say it.
Corpocracy.
Corpocracy.
Cressy.
I
Yeah.
feel like
At
Backstory.
least,
Maybe you'll actually make a good one on your next character. That's gonna be totally not
I mean,
not happening this Friday.
With a bad form.
ooh, your next character you
No, on the character who might die next session.
made that last session. Yeah, but I want
Right now, of the villains here, the most scariest and possibly most deadly. I'm not scared of any of these fools except this one. This one is a living crap.
Okay,
out of me.
That's
Peter
very
That
just
was
lay
a
down.
terrible
Look at
session.
that smile. That just screams. I'm up and then split body. When you wake up screaming with no body parts, then I'll kill you.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Speaking of which,
I mean,
oh,
I haven't killed him yet.
Jan, final thoughts.
That was, I'll be honest, that was a very
Jan,
Sorry,
final thoughts.
laid down, and I came back to coming awake with all your body parts spread around you. And
He was talking to me.
I'm glad you both sleep in the same thoughts.
Story is a terrifying, nightmarish dystopia.
China,
And what? Yeah.
for 3 words. That okay? I'll take it. And Jeremy. So
I mean, a good thing. Like it to really kill.
true. That's actually very true. Like dogs, the chocolate slaughter.
Like dogs.
The wolf itself and itself well. I'm not going to disparage it. Why it's a global powerhouse right now, because it has gotten efficiency down to a science. As for backstory, I'm with my on this that I talked about at the beginning of the stream. There's no such like we did in the last stream when we talked about, or the couple streams where we talked about villains, scenery. It's all about implementation, and the worst, but it's also the most true, is less is more. The more you use their, the more it's going to stick. The same enough use it. You want to leave, but at the same time, a well thought out backstory is not a bad thing. It makes it easier for you. That don't matter. I've done it a bunch of time with in my games, and there's some that players in D&D game have absolutely no idea what the like it means nothing, and then there's others that will see and put it together. Implementation, and it's better. Thing that I always, especially, it's always easier to give than take back. So always start with the lesser amount and then add as you need. It's the same writing. It's I was C4. Beside me was Sarah. Further down the great below me. We are so sorry that Insanieac couldn't. Likeness not check out the Patreon. I mean, we have sorry, free tarot reading for everyone. Thank you all for watching. Sorry you had nothing better to do, but I'm so... We're all thankful. Yeah. We finally got the stabbers, and now we just need to stab the people with the stabbers.
Ding dong, the
Ding dong, disease, the disease is dead.
That's interesting.
The disease is dead. Oh, the pandemic kids. Pandemic kids. And here's a lolly for your trouble.
troubles.
Here's a mask for your troubles. Oh, everyone have a good night.
Have a good one.
You're gonna the stream without saying something awkward?
That's
Insanieac
awkward
isn't
thing.
here.
All right.
It's awkward. A cat being like a starfish.
staring at your asshole.
You know what?
Otherwise,
Exactly. And oh no, end
That's
stream.
asshole.
End stream.
What?